And then when I got these sound effects, you realise it's not just one sound that plays, it's 4 different sounds, and you have to export them for each bit so it doesn't pop, doesn't cut, and sounds flawless. And it's just, it's been that process. And now we're 8 months into it, and I've done over 2,000 sounds.
Welcome to Mognet Podcast. This is where we deep dive into all things Final Fantasy. I'm your host, Chef Monkey, and today we have an incredible guest joining us. We are thrilled to have MikeDoesAudio with us, a talented modder who's been working on 2 massive projects for Final Fantasy VIII, which we'll be hearing a bit more about later. We'll be taking a journey into his own journey of Final Fantasy and as a modder, as well as his love for the series as a whole, and what it takes to bring these sound projects to life. So grab your headphones and join us as we dive into the world of Final Fantasy VIII mods. Welcome to the show, Mike. How are you doing today?
Thanks very much. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm not doing too bad. Got the coffee, got the dogs, so we've got 3 co-hosts at the back there that are probably going to have some input at some point. Let's just get started straight at the beginning. How did you discover Final Fantasy?
Final Fantasy, so the first one I ever played Final Fantasy VII. I played it when I was about 8, and it was a friend of mine when I was growing up, like one of my best mates in primary school, and he had a massive stack of different PlayStation games. I was kind of like, well, what's this one? I liked the artwork on the front, saw a little meteor on the front of FF7. I was like, oh, this is interesting. I started playing it. I was like, oh, immediately felt completely different to anything I'd ever played before. Like any turn-based game, anything like that. Like the music was completely different. It just felt vastly different from the games I'd played before. Like I think my console I had at home at the time was still a Mega Drive. I was just obsessed with Sonic, so it was like, I was like into platformers like Streets of Rage and stuff like that. And I played it, and it was just like vastly different, completely different world, completely immersive, and I absolutely sucked at it. That was terrible. So I have my own copy of it.
Of course, yeah. It's a very tight timeline for me. I don't quite remember which one it was. Either I heard all my friends in school talking about Final Fantasy VII and VIII, and we went shopping like literally the next day, and I saw what I thought was the game they were talking about. I got my mum to pick it up for me. It turned out to be Final Fantasy IX. So that's the first one I ever owned.
Not a bad mistake to make, though.
Nope, definitely not. But around a very similar sort of time, we were at a family gathering, and my cousin had bought his Nintendo. I think it was a Nintendo Game Boy Advance at the time. I don't think the DS had been released yet. And we sat in the corner and just played the hell out of Final Fantasy Tactics. So those were my first 2 games that introduced me to
Tactics being one of the first
the
ones
series.
Is pretty unique as well.
Yeah.
I still never played Tactics. That's on my list. Like main titles, I've done most of them, but Tactics, I just do it.
Yeah, it was. I went to go and pick up a load of the old games like I've been doing recently, and unfortunately I found out Final Fantasy Tactics was never released on PlayStation in Europe. It was only released on PlayStation in NA, which I think was a big mistake.
Yeah. We're always getting compared over here.
How did... Obviously, you've said that it differs to the games that you were playing, the platformers like Sonic, Streets of Rage. Mm-hmm. Were you just then hooked on RPGs from that point going forwards?
I still played a lot of other games. I still played, like Metal Gear Solid was a massive obsession as well. That's probably like my next game series behind FF. It's like topping my list. But 7 I played to death, and 8, one of my mates had like his uncle was like a game reviewer. Like back in the 90s, no one had that, and he got like a really early copy of FF8, which I've still got in a box back here. Like he wasn't massive on Final Fantasy, but knew I was, and gave me that, and I played it to death. Yeah, absolutely loved it. So I did still obsessively play them, but there was a bunch of other games I played as well. But whenever a new FF title came out, I tried to get it as early as I could.
Yep, definitely. So just a brief history of your Final Fantasy journey. You said you started with 7 did you literally just play them in order after that? Or were there any
Yeah.
like hiccups where you picked up
Oh,
different ones?
So with like 7, 8, 9, and 10, and 10 too, actually, I played those as they came out. Pretty much, 10 was the only game I had on PlayStation 2, and I got it for probably about 6 months. And I was incredibly excited about it just because it was the first one with voice acting, like that.
Yes.
I was so excited about that, and I just played it to death for so long. Yeah, 7. I had numerous copies of it that broke from overplaying it. Which I think I've got like 3 copies of it in a box behind my desk. 8, still got my original copy, played that to death. 9, I got that for Christmas, and I went with my mum to buy it. We got it like early, like at the start of the month sort of thing. And I remember she just like hid it in her room, so whenever she went out, I'd just go and just like sneak one of the discs out of the box and just put it in. And I completed half the game before it even got to Christmas, because I was like,
I can't wait. Can't wait.
Yeah, and like 7 and 9 are genuinely 2 of my favourite games ever, and 8 and 10 are right behind it. Like, I really struggle to like tier it and say what my favourite is and things like that, because it changes depending on what emotion I feel. Like,
Yeah.
9 specifically, if I go back to play Final Fantasy 9, that's like my like feeling sorry for myself game. Like, I'll probably never play it on Twitch. I'll probably never stream it just because it's
Too personal.
Yeah, unless it's a voice mod, because it'll feel like a different experience. But like
Yes.
the original game, I think I'll keep that for myself.
Dude, I still have nightmares about 9 and the damn skipping minigame.
Oh yeah, I just don't do it. I just don't do it. I've never done 1,000 on it. I can't be bothered.
Yeah, I find it hard to pick a favourite just because, despite the fact it's all one series, they are vastly different games. They're not really comparable, in my opinion, because they're almost like, despite the running themes like Sid, Chocobos, Moogles, Crystals, etc., 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 I feel like they're completely unrelated games. They have completely different settings, completely different plots. There is no continuation apart from direct sequels. So I when people say what's your favorite Final Fantasy game, it's like the answer is just yes.
Yeah. There's I guess there's similarities between some of the games. Obviously, like the continuation of either between Tactics and 12, and like you do have like the continued threads like Sid and Biggs and Wedge and Moogles and Chocobos. I grew up saying Chocobos, but I've heard like it be voice acted for so long. I've had to gradually like retrain my brain to saying Chocobos.
Oh, I say
if you've had that
Chocobos.
from the UK with a bunch of stuff, but like through playing the voice mod for Final Fantasy VIII Echo S8, I've had to retrain myself of Balam to Balam and Dolit to Dole. I'm like,
No, it's Dolit. It's Dolit.
Yeah. I know that's the uphill battle of the voice mod, and voice acted sequels and stuff like that.
So, speaking of voice acting and audio work, how did you get started? Because it's your job, isn't it? Audio work.
So it's one of my jobs. I've got a few, but yeah, I'm a sound designer by profession. I've got a business I run sound design through. So there's quite a long story for this one, so bear with me a minute.
No worries.
So like, taking me back to as a teenager, I started playing instruments when I was a teenager throughout school, and I thought that was gonna be my passion. I was like, oh, yeah, I'll be in a band, I'll play live, I'll tour around, I'll do that stuff, like the young idealist and the wide-eyed creative dreamer sort of thing. That was me as a kid. And then sort of like as I got more into it, I realised I just didn't want to sort of like be on the road and things like that. And I don't know, I didn't want to do that over and over. I didn't really want to tour and stuff like that, but I wanted to get into the recording of it. I loved the idea of recording sound and recording music and be able to record myself at home. So I studied that at college and then university. And kind of like through all those different bits, I was like learning to sound design was something that came gradually, and it was actually like I know a specific moment of when I was like I started to think about sound in movies. It was like, do you remember when they released like the Lord of the Rings extended stuff for DVDs, and they had like all the extra additional features, and it was like it was like 20 minutes of them just like breaking down Helm's Deep sound design, and it was a guy with like this desk that's like the length of a fucking hall. And it's like he was like, so there's 120 different tracks of audio on here, and he broke it down going along it from like the rain onto the armor of the Urukai, to like, the drums then layered on top of it, to their feet squelching, and the fact there was like 3 different layers for the feet squelch, and that was just for when like the Urukai are approaching Helm's Deep at like the dead of night.
Yep,
and
it's insane the work that goes into it.
Yeah, and like it all kind of came around the same sort of time, and then I just started playing around with like redoing sound on different scenes just to see if I could do it. And then over time, it's kind of like evolved into different things. And yeah, my job, I do a lot of sound design for advertising and like some short movies, some game stuff, and the mod projects, and yeah, it gets me doing a lot of different stuff.
So speaking of the mod projects, how did it transition into? Well, how did it transition into doing mods? How did that start up? And why Final Fantasy VIII of all games? Like, what drew you specifically to mod for that game?
All right, you might have to keep me back on track here. So, like, I guess it started from mine and James the cat. We started a YouTube channel called Final Fantasy and Chill, where we remix music from Final Fantasy. I've been doing that since college. I've been doing those remixes. I only started to do it on YouTube in like during the pandemic. I was like, well, why not? It's a mixture of self-confidence and a number of issues, but it took me quite a while to sort of just like pull my finger out and start it. Same with James, and like we've talked about doing a project together for so long, like a long-term project. So we started doing that, and I was sort of like, it'd be really nice to be able to like maybe stream doing some of these remixes or something like that. And I started like, I hadn't really used Twitch too much at that point, and I started just looking at it, and I found Suna Mods, and saw that he was doing these. At the time, he was working on Echo S7, which is full voice mod for Final Fantasy VII, and I found him streaming, and I was like, this is fucking cool as fuck. Like, like him and a team of people have basically just built these tools to be able to add voice acting to it. Requisitioned they had people from their chat doing NPCs, and they'd found some incredibly skilled voice actors to do it. And I was like, this is really cool. Really great if they had a cool music mod for this. And someone else had been doing a music mod for quite a bit and did a very, very good job. There's a couple of people who have done different music mods and did really high quality for Final Fantasy VII. I was like, well, maybe I won't do 7 yet, but I love Final Fantasy VIII, and I knew they were going to do Echo S8 next, voice mod for Final Fantasy VIII. So I was like, well, maybe we can do a music mod for that. And I looked at the music mods for it, and it kind of seemed like there was ones where there were like people had done a really good job of a few songs, but no one had completed an entire thing. No one had done an entire music mod for it. I was like, well, maybe that's something I could do, but it's sort of like the channel, and like our YouTube channel, and it's sort of like the mods that are existing for Final Fantasy VII. So why not combine that and try and do it? I did that, and sort of like similarly time while I was doing that, Crane, official Crane, who's the voice director for Echo S7, 8, and 9. He does a lot of the main casting for it, and does all the audio editing for it. He's a machine. He spoke to me about doing the sound mod, SFXJ. It's him that named it, and he was basically like, Mike, I know you're a sound designer and you got with it. Would you be interested in doing this for me? And then I sort of took it and ran with it because he's incredibly busy. So that's how I got started on it. I hope that wasn't too much of a waffly answer, but I got
No, definitely not. So before we start breaking down and talking about the individual mods that you're working on, I just want to touch on the importance of like sound audio and soundtracks in games and why you think they're so crucial to the gaming experience. Like I have if I think of, I know it's not a Final Fantasy game, but if I think of Dark Cloud, I don't know if you ever played it on PlayStation 2. The first thing I think of is the music in the first village. When I think of Final Fantasy VIII, the first thing I think of is Blue Fields. When I think of Final Fantasy IX, the first thing I think of is the overworld theme.
Crossing those hills.
And with 10, it's Besaid Island. It doesn't matter how much I've played the games and all the other amazing moments I have in them. My first thought of a game is a particular track that absolutely resonates with me for some reason.
Yeah, okay, yeah. For me, I think this stands true for both Sonic and both Final Fantasy. Imagine those games without music.
Yeah, no Green Hill theme.
Like, I mean, specifically talking about the PlayStation 1 releases of it, and of Final Fantasy, and then, all the Mega Drive releases. Think about Sonic without music. You just get the occasional sound effect. Everything else, it would be completely quiet. Sonic, this is less so for, but it does also convey an emotive response. If you think about Final Fantasy as a whole, the music is a narrative device. It helps you transition to different emotions. It can induce fear. It can induce excitement, panic, everything. Like, if I think about playing Final Fantasy VII, and I think about when the Trail of Blood music plays. I've also tracked. My brain's gone dead on that. But the music that plays when you're in the Shinra building, when you wake up and the door to your cell is open and there's the blood going up, Genova's cell is broken up, and just playing that and feeling terrified, feeling terrified as a kid. And then, like, similarly, I think Anxious Heart as a track, when you're in Midgar, it doesn't evoke the same emotion as when you're in Nibelheim. When you go into Nibelheim and you see the guys in the black robe with the tattoos wandering.
Yeah.
That, again, even though it's just little tiny pixels and look all sort of weird and bumpy, still terrified the shit out of me when I was a kid. I don't think, like, if you imagine different music, if it had like happy, jolly music playing in there, you're not going to feel like that.
No.
Like, I think Uematsu is the reason he's my favourite game composer is because he could evoke that emotion with the same piece of music in completely different scenes.
Yeah.
Just depending on context, could make you feel completely differently.
Yeah, I'd say his successor, as it were, also does a really, really good job. Absolutely fantastic on his work on 14. Just to touch on what you were saying there about how it gets you feeling certain ways in games. Again, if there was no music track playing at the start of 7 when the timer starts ticking down, like that like it made me anxious. It's like, shit, yeah. I've got to get out of here. I've only got however many minutes I gave myself. Yeah,
exactly. If they just carried on playing the Mako Reactor theme, at that point you're not going to feel any differently. But like, well, it's ticking down there, but because it's got a slow tempo, like beats per minute are still quite low. I think it's like 80 BPM or something like that. You're not going to get the same. It's not going to evoke the same sort of like heart rate raising.
Yeah. So before we start really diving into your soundtrack mod, 2 questions. What is your favourite track from 8, and which one's been your favourite to remaster?
They're probably both the same answer. It's the Extreme. Like, this is by a thin margin because, again, I love the songs for different reasons. Like,
yes.
If you like Balam Garden, as a track by itself, it's like it feels like you're coming home whenever I hear that for the first time, and that's what I tried to do with the sound design. When I was in it, I wanted to add an extra layer to that, and with the remixing, I wanted to all sound sort of like just add to that feeling of nostalgia you get whenever you play Final Fantasy VIII for the first time, and it pans over the quad, and you hear Balam Garden's music playing. But the Extreme, Balam Garden's one of them, but the Extreme is probably the top one, just because it's like it only plays right at the end when you're fighting like Ultimisia's final form, which has got like the light in her face.
Yeah.
it only plays at one point, but it's like, for me, Uematsu's greatest work are his final boss themes, just because they're so diverse, and he always does little callbacks to loads. And like, if you listen to the start of the Extreme, it has an acoustic guitar riff that plays that is very reminiscent to Nightmare's Beginning, which is Vincent's theme in Final Fantasy VII. And then when it kicks into it, it has this sort of like drum beat that has like a syncopated bass line that's playing that is very similar to the start of the Final Fantasy IX boss battle theme. So it kind of has like what came before it and what comes after it at the start, and then when it drops becomes something else while also sort of being like dancing mad. So just like, I don't know, similarly to how FF9 is like Sakaguchi's homage to everything that came before 9, like that theme to me feels like Uematsu's homage to what's come before and where he wants to go with the composition in Final Fantasy. That is what is my favourite. The landing is very, very good as well. I agree there. Stream is awesome, but it's definitely the landing for me. The landing is an absolute theme. Like, I think the landing, a lot of people say specifically that it's like the true intro of the game. Like, you have the nice chilled sort of like the prologue, like the first bit of Final Fantasy VIII, from when you have Liberi Fatali playing the whole mission to get Ifrit, and then when you go to Balam Town and start there and get on the pod, it's kind of like that is the true intro to the game. Like, I've heard that from a lot of people, which I can kind of see in some ways. Not. I don't fully agree, but I can see why it's such an iconic piece of music.
What I also like about Uematsu is how essentially he's kept the same theme for Chocobo, but he's just renamed it, the tracks, in the style of music he's using for that particular game or track, like Chocobo de Samba and all that sort of stuff. I think that's incredible.
Yeah.
That one
Techno
track, one simple piece of music can change so much just depending on the style and genre of music is used in it.
If you think about it, there's sort of like, there's only really 3 tracks that he's done that with throughout Final Fantasy. Like, actually no, probably 4. You have like the prelude, so the prologue, which is, with Final Fantasy XII, the menu music on that.
Yep.
And it's all over Final Fantasy XIV. And
yes, it is.
It's all over the first 5 specifically, but always plays in the others at some point. And the Chocobo theme tune. And then one that just appears in every game not in every game, but in a lot of the games at some point. Battle on the Big Bridge from FF5. That shows up all over the place. It's a tune.
So, diving into your actual soundtrack mod, what was your process of doing that? Did you just literally go from the start of the game to the end? Are you working through it in like chronological order? Or because some of the tracks, like, they're not repeated, but some of them like overlay, do you like do all the ones that have similarities before then moving on to the next one? How are you like tackling it? How far through are you with that mod? How much further have you got to go?
I don't remember where I started. I do know that I think it's probably Balam that I did first. So like before this, I'd remixed each track several times, like quite a few iterations in different genres: synthwave versions, chilled remix versions, guitar versions, piano versions, 8-bit versions. I'd remix a load of different ones. But I had tried orchestral versions, and like my whole sort of approach for OSTRF, which is the music replacement mod, the whole point in that for me was to make a mod that the songs were faithful to the original, so they weren't completely off the wall. I wanted to just be modernized re-orchestrations opposed to being a completely different genre. So I use like high quality sample banks to do it. So I use a lot of Native Instruments plugins because they essentially use like it's all samples. So like their real instruments have been recorded, and then I use them digitally and try to make them sound human. some instruments is a lot more difficult on it. I still can't nail strings. I'm still not happy with nailing strings. I'll keep doing that and working on those for as long as I can. The mod itself is out. It's been out for a couple of months. Actually, I just did an update, version 1.1. You can find that on the Sunamods website, so sunamods.com. And if you go into Final Fantasy VIII in OSTRF, there is a thing in there. I can post a link in the chat to it. But that is released and out. The other mod, SFXJ, that is in the works. I'm aiming for a January release to that. We'll see if I get to that, because that's a much bigger project. But I think to answer your original question, I think I started with OSTRA on Balam Garden and kind of went from there, like linearly. Did like the Ifrit's Cave theme, which is Find Your Way. I did the battle theme and boss theme, all different things like that, and kind of just went through track by track for a bit, and then just started to do the ones that inspired me, and after that fill in the blanks. I think I answered your questions there.
Yeah, I would say so. Sorry, my co-host Loki has decided to start barking at the door again. So what? Just talk us through just go through the process of doing one track. What do you do to the original? How do you make it better, as it were? How do you improve it? How do you re-orchestrate it? What is your process?
Okay, so I used those dogs. I used MIDI. I use MIDI files. So some of them are extracted from the game. Some of them MIDI files have been produced by other people over the years. You can find a lot of different great resources. There's like MIDI Shrine. That's a really, really good one that you can use for it. And essentially, I'll use my DAW of choice, which is digital audio workstation. I use Cubase, so I will find, for example, Balam Garden. I'll focus on that. If I get the MIDI file for that, I import it into Cubase, and then that will have all of your lines broken down. So you'll have, here's the harp, here's the glockenspiel, here is the timpani. Like, it will have them all broken down to different tracks, and then I revoice them, tweak individual velocities, so that's how hard the note is hit. And then I will mix it, compress it, master it, and then you have to export it into OGG format, which is like a lossless MP3 file, and you have to set metadata on it, which essentially says, this is how you loop it. This is the point in that song you have that it loops. Which was a process that I had to learn and kind of terrified me at first. But I got it there. Got it in the end. Yeah, that was probably the most difficult part, was getting it so they looped perfectly. I had to experiment a lot with it until I got to that stage where it was flawless. And I'm still working on that. I'm doing rolling updates to the OST mod, so it will take a bit. I think that's explained, abridged enough. If I get too into it, I will talk forever. You're muted, by the way.
Yep. Something we could end up talking about forever is all I said.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously you mentioned you got asked to do the sound effect thing. You were redoing all the sound effects as well as putting in sound effects that didn't exist. Mm-hmm. How do you start identifying where you think there should be sound effects where there are none?
Okay. Right, so part of my inspiration for the mod was that there's a Final Fantasy VII equivalent called Cosmo Memory, and it's done by Mod Bones, and he'd added ambient sounds onto it. So, for example, if you think of a field background being the picture background that existed in the game. So again, let's focus on Balam. So you have the main hall, you have the lift in the background, you have the computer in the middle, and then the water off to the side. So it'd be adding what that room sounds like. Yep. So just to add extra immersion to it. So I'd think you have the water in the far left, you have the water in the far right. You can hear the people echoing throughout the hall, so it shouldn't sound like they're close to you. It should sound a bit farther away, a bit reverby. I didn't want to put footsteps of other people around there. I thought that might be a bit overkill. And I think it should be is subtle, but add an extra dimension to it. And as I said before, with doing the music for Balam, it should feel like you're coming home. It should feel familiar. It should feel warm. And I sort of went for that approach with the sound effects. So it was like doing that for essentially every single screen in the game. So every single screen in the game means I need to think about it like that, what sort of emotion it should evoke, and make it so it loops smoothly. So when it gets to the end of the clip, because you also want to focus on file size for delivery and things like that. So I'll do like a 30-second clip of it and make sure it loops perfectly. Like that, it's a long process for adding them. So that's what I've done for adding sounds. I think that answers that question.
Yeah, definitely does. So with ones that pre-exist, obviously the sound files aren't as advanced as what we have access to be able to create now. Do you just remaster them in terms of like you do with the audio tracks, or do you recreate them entirely to make them sound fresher?
Entirely. So
that is a lot of work.
Yeah. So I'll talk about how I started the mod if you don't mind.
No, go for it.
That was a process in itself. So we use there's a driver that allows us to do a lot of this called FFNX, and we have a team of developers that work with this on Suna mods, and essentially what this driver does, it gives us a bunch of different layers. So the voice layer, so you can bind voices to text boxes, sound effects layer, so we can replace the sound effects from the originals, the new ones. The music layer, so we can do the same as what the sound effects. Ambience layer, what I explained previously, to add sound effects to a particular background. They all exist in different folders. For me to get started on 8, I had no idea about the existence of this. I played the mod, I'd used the driver, like I'd done it for 7. I'd used all these tools, but had no idea how they did any of it. So I asked Axman, who's the NPC voice director, I asked him, through actually who's in chat there, she put me in contact. She's like, you should speak to Hirax about doing the sound effects for it, and it'll put you in the right direction. And he sort of he said, all right, so you want to do the sound effects for this game, then you want to replace every sound effects, do you? As in being like, okay, right, this guy is definitely not going to do this. He's definitely not going to replace all these. So he just gave me a folder full of .ogg files, which are numbered sequentially from like 1 to 5,500. Like just number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And no one had ever made a category list of what these are. So we had no idea what any of these sounds were. So you just had to figure them out. I had no idea about the tools you could use to help you along with this, like trace tools. So I started off, I was like, right, I'll work out the basic ones and then I'll work out the GFs. And I was just doing it in such a dumb, slow manner, really inefficiently, and taking fucking hours to do so. Days, in fact. And then I found one guy who'd actually been categorizing the sounds in. There's a couple of different discords we use. One is called Kim, KHIM, and you'll find a lot of information on Final Fantasy mods on there. But I use a Discord for it, and the Suna mods Discord. And I found him in one of the two, I can't remember which one now, and he'd basically been making this category list, and we combined our efforts. And then he ended up doing more of it so I could focus on sound design and creation. And then we found another guy who was doing it in an even smarter way, and we combined all our efforts. The other guy, called Andrea, he sort of showed up, did this really smart way of locating what all the sounds are, working out what all the sounds are, did it in about 8 weeks, uploaded his category list to GitHub, then deleted his Discord and has disappeared.
Excellent. Just what you need.
He showed up, gave us all his work, was like just a pleasure to work with, and then disappeared and it's gone forever. And I couldn't even say thank you to him. So I tried to reply on his GitHub and all sorts, and just be like, "Thank you, mate. Bye. Love you." And yeah, so that was it. That was helpful. I'm glad he showed up, and I hope he's okay if he ever sees this. Yeah, so with that, I then have to go through the process of replaying the sound. So I kind of the first sound I did for the entire thing was Shiva.
Yep.
And I got footage from out the game and did it how I would do a movie. If I'm doing sound design in post to, say, a short film, I would have the video imported into Cubase and then work on it scene by scene, breakdown sounds, do little ambient sounds, do little incidental sounds, do accent movements, and then do like sweetness and stop, which is like the twinkles and stuff. So I did Shiva. That was the first sound I ever did. And then when I got these sound effects, you realise it's not just one sound that plays, it's 4 different sounds, and you have to export them for each bit so it doesn't pop, doesn't cut, and sounds flawless. And it's just, it's been that process. And now we're 8 months into it, and I've done over 2,000 sounds.
Only another 3,000 odd to go then. Well,
nope, we've got
not even that, is it? Because you're creating sounds for ones that didn't previously exist as well.
Yeah, so I've got a ridiculous spreadsheet that tells me how to do it all. So there's 1,542 sounds in the original game. I've done 1,033 to right now, which is 12th of October. Additional sounds, I've added in an extra 1,000 sounds so far. And I'll keep getting
so far. Yep. So from someone that has very limited knowledge on how audio works behind the scenes, I would assume that sound effects are easier to work on than a soundtrack, just because of how long a soundtrack is, how complex it is, all the different layers, instruments. But talking to you now, it seems like that's not the case at all.
It's different. It's a different thing. Like professionally, I don't market myself as a composer to other people. I did for a while, and I've composed for a fair few things. There's probably like 1 or 2 people I will do composition work for, because I wanted to keep that for me. Like I don't like, it's sort of the same reason why I don't learn much music theory. Like I know bits and pieces, but the more you know about something, the more you struggle to watch something. Like, for example, if I watch Jurassic Park, I think about how they made the T-Rex sound, which is something I had to do for this mod. So I listen to that and think, oh, how did they do that differently to how I have made the T-Rex sound?
Yeah.
And like I researched all those different elements. So basically, like, well, when you're watching a movie, you
can't enjoy the movie.
You can, but you enjoy it differently.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking about complexities of narrative as much as I used to. I'm thinking about, oh, how have they done that J cut to throw it into the next scene? Like, you know, when you hear the sound of the next scene play before it cuts to it visually, so you hear it fade in.
Yeah.
So like, you'll hear a busy street fade in, and like when they're having like a close dialogue inside or something, and they'll cut to being outside. Like, I think of things like that now when I'm doing it, and I don't want to do that with music.
Yeah.
So I tend to not work on it professionally as much. I'll do it for like the mod projects, because I love remixing stuff, because I don't have to spend that time writing stuff completely from scratch. I do that for myself. I don't want to write music for someone else entirely. I don't want to work for a brief. I want to do it for me. Like, I want to keep music creation for me, like original music creation for me. And I probably will do it for games, but the time's got to be right, and
your own personal preference.
Right. Whereas sound, I can work on it I can work on it regimented. I can separate myself emotionally from it, because it's different sort of way I approach doing sound to doing music. I mean, music's a lot more of an emotional process. I think that's the best way I can explain it without going on for 3 hours.
I can relate. Obviously, my background as a career is kitchens. I'm a chef. I cannot go out anywhere to eat without not picking at the food, but like analyzing the food, analyzing the service. Mm-hmm. That is me in a restaurant. I analyze everything. It's very rare that I can go into a restaurant, sit down and enjoy my meal just for sitting down enjoying my meal.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. I have to be in the right mindset. Like if I'm with a group of people and it's a special occasion, it's a lot easier. But if I'm just out for a meal with 1 or 2 people or a single person, it's very difficult. I will look at the servers. I will look at the kitchen staff if it's an open kitchen. I will look at the bartenders. I will look at it drives me nuts sometimes.
I can fully imagine, actually. I wonder how clean that kitchen is. Like everything. You can think about every last different layer of it.
But then the upside of it, because I've worked in kitchens, just detouring slightly from your point here.
Please do.
What I see, what some people would see as a problem, or why is this like just normal people coming in? It's like, why is that not like that? That's not very safe. That's not very clean. I can see it from a practical point of view and be absolutely fine with it. So just getting back on track to Final Fantasy and away from cooking.
I could, mate, please do sidebar. It's nice. It's genuinely nice to hear you talk about it. Like, if I talk about myself too much, I just feel like a raging narcissist. But you're absolutely right. Like that is the exact same process. The exact same.
And I imagine it's the same for everyone who works in a particular field that goes out and can interact with their field in real life, as it were. Like, I imagine it's the same for, I don't know why this is the first thing that popped into my head, but people that do woodwork and joinery and carpentry, just walking around anywhere where this stuff is present, they're probably analysing it and going, oh, I could have done that better.
I'm getting furious by every table that rocks.
So we touched on this a bit before the show. What do you feel like, what is the importance and the role of modding in not just the Final Fantasy community, but the game community in general? Like Skyrim is notorious for how many mods it has and how much it changes the game. Like, there's people that have made mods that you put in and you're not in Skyrim anymore. You're somewhere completely different, and they've made their own game within Skyrim.
Okay. So I'm going to literally steal Suna's wordage for this, because like, the brand title for Suna mods is "Breathing Life into Old Games," and like it's fucking apt. Sorry, I don't know if I'm meant to be swearing or not.
That's fine.
Thank you. Good. I've done it a few times, but yeah, that's genuinely how I look at it. Like, it gives you a new enjoyment to something you love. Like, I remember way before I considered modding, way before I'd met Suna and Crane, like any of the guys who work in it, way before I'd met any of those guys, I'd been playing their mods and not realizing who these people were that did it, and building friendships with them and stuff. And like, I've played mods from the people who did it before them, and things like that. Like, because I think it would have been like seeing stuff on Reddit, and people had done like these early upscales of stuff and mod replacements and score replacements, and kind of just seeing like these old games which did have limited technology because it was restrictions at the time, like just quite how much they had to fit in to make a full vibrant world onto a PS1 disc, which was 700 megabytes. Like, it's insane. And like in the cartridges before it, like there were some serious restrictions. We don't have that now, so we can use that to keep it as being the same game, but update it and make it fresh and make it a new experience. Make it so it's like you remember it being as a kid, but it's modern. Like, there's a lot of people who won't play these old games. It's like, oh, it's shit graphics, it's mid, it's this. We're trying to take that away and modernize it, so it will show people who wouldn't necessarily play those games because of those restrictions, introduce them to the thing that we love. At least that's my perspective, and I think speaking to Suna, I think it's the same as his. At least that's it. That's it for me. Like, I want to I loved playing those games, so being able to do that's a pleasure. And like, at first I was like, I don't know if people would actually watch me do it or actually play it, but like, honestly, the support I've had I've only been streaming since January, and I think I started modding on stream in March. And like, the support I've got from doing it in that time has been really so nice. It's been something that like, it's really helped me with like self-confidence and a lot of different things. I know I'm getting off subject here.
No, carry on.
From what you asked, but that's the thing. It's helped me personally, professionally, and such a lovely community of people to work with, and the people who can watch me do it as well.
So how do you feel that modding has contributed to like the evolution of the series. Like we touched on this briefly before the show, how, at least in my opinion, the Memoria project for Final Fantasy IX has indirectly sparked a Final Fantasy IX remake that I am 100% sure that they're doing, even though it's unannounced.
I think so. Project Memoria, the Unreal remake, has nothing to do with this. To be clear, that one has nothing to do with this.
I'll get you to split the difference in a minute.
Okay, so I'll do it quickly. Project Memoria is a fan project where people are basically doing a recreation of the game in Unreal 5 engine, and they're doing it as sort of like a tech demo, and they're putting it on YouTube. It's incredible work. They're really talented guys, but that's not to do with this. The Cinemon's team, the Memoria mod manager, which predated it, and that is, you download that and it works on top of the game. You have to buy the game in Steam or on PC to be able to use it. So you have to buy Square's property to be able to use ours. The mod manager, it does stuff like you can add the Maguri mod, so like the really high res textures, and things like that. And the Echo S9 voice mod, that all goes through that. I've not done any work on 9 yet at all. I just make it my business to know what's going on with it. Because I'll probably do a music mod on it at some point. Going back to your original question, remind me what it was, please. It's about how mods influence gaming. So also not a project anything to do with me, but a Sunamods project that is one of the main people on it. You know the fighting game King of Fighters?
Yes.
Yeah, so she's been working on a voice mod for that, an English voice mod, and I'm pretty sure, I might be wrong on this, please correct me if I'm wrong on this in chat, that the creators of that game started to make their own English version of the game because of the work you guys did. It might be a terrible explanation, but
that's pretty incredible. If it's accurate, at least.
Yeah, I think it is. I think I overheard that. I might be misremembering, but I'm trying to. Yeah, if anyone in chat thinks I'm saying information incorrect, I think I've got this. I think I've got all this right that I've been saying. But yeah, I tried to keep up to date with what's going on in other mods, but yeah, I think modding has been hugely influential. They decided to cast English VAs to the next SNK game in Fatal Fury. Okay, fair enough. That is pretty simple. Pretty similar, even indeed.
Yep.
Actually, there's one more. Sorry, but sorry to
go for it. Go for it.
I think probably the most successful modding is Sonic Mania. So Sonic Mania is just a team of modders who had made their own Sonic games, and then Sega were like, this kicks the shit out of loads of 3D Sonic games or like Sonic Generation, stuff like that. They want to just come and make some games for us. So Sonic Mania is literally just modders who have managed to make a mainline Sega game. Like an official Sega project. If you're not playing Sonic Mania and you like the Sonics, play it. It's fucking amazing.
That's pretty good. So you've mentioned these people a few times. Do you want to talk me through maybe the team of modders you're on, what they do, what their roles are, if that's information something you have to hand, just so people can sort of roughly know who does what in the names you've been mentioning?
Okay. Well, I'll just work through the people who have got me involved in stuff, and the ones that I'm genuinely friends with. Like there's other people who are incredibly talented who will probably miss off this list. It's not a personal thing, it's just because I've not spent as much time with you. But Suna was the first person I started talking to. So Suna Mods on Twitch. He's essentially the front of the brand for it. He's one of the guys who got us all sort of together, and he's a good friend of mine. He does a lot of coding. He does a lot of these sort of interviews with people, and yeah, just is a multi-skilled guy. He's a very multi-skilled guy. There's Crane, who's like right up there with him, in like those two are like the top. They're the most important people in all these mods, and he's the voice director, and he also does audio editing and dialogue editing and all sorts. And he's a very, very, very talented voice actor. He, like, if you played any of the the Echo West games. He voices Cloud and Barrett, as well as a bunch of other characters in it. Final Fantasy VIII, he's Squall. Final Fantasy IX, he's Kuja. And I've heard him do like a wide array of different voices. Like, incredibly talented guy, really, really, really good person. And so, yeah, inspired me to do these mods. Who's in there, wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't for her. She's learned lots of different stuff, speaks a bunch of different languages to be able to help with translations, and she's learned to code through it as well. Like, and is a very good friend. Harax, also very talented voice actor. Haraxman, very talented voice actor, and he's taught himself to code as well for these projects. Uprisen. Uprisen is a great dude. He's done a lot of different projects, right? His projects, he did this crazy upscale for all of the backgrounds of Final Fantasy VII. I say upscale, it's not. He's just redrawn every last battle background in the game to an incredibly high standard. And then also did the most cursed mod for Final Fantasy VII that exists, called the Barrett mod. Have you heard of the Barrett mod before, Chef?
I have not.
So he replaced it where everyone in the game is Barrett. But it's not like he's just made it so every mod is Barrett. Every model is Barrett. He's done it so like the enemies are like a small portion of it is Barrett. Like you'll get like the Proud Clod, that gigantic big robot, and it'll just be Barrett's face like in the middle of this little like robot thing. It's crazy. Like the detail he went to, he must have spent like a year on it. Like, but just those are the guys that I'm probably closest with. Axel, who's in the chat there, I've got to know more recently, and got so much respect for that dude. He's just about to finish a project of doing again upscales, but there's more context to it than just like upscales. Doing video upscales for Final Fantasy VIII FMVs. So like, you know, the videos that looked breathtaking to us as a kid, he's taken those and made them to modern resolutions and made them smooth. But it's not like he's just put them into an AI upscaler. He uses various different AIs for different parts that do different things well, and then blends them together and works on individual frames to make it all smooth and blend and perfect. It's not AI upscaling, it is art. Incredibly talented, and that's about to be released, called Cinema RF. He's a newer friend, but yeah, that's it. There's a lot of other people on the team that I'm not mentioning, but I will go on forever if I do. But those are the people who have been like
understandable,
who have been massive supporters to me, and I consider friends. That's on the team at least.
Yeah. Again, we touched on this briefly earlier in the episode about, at least in Final Fantasy VIII, what your favourite track has been, at least to listen to and remaster yourself. What about the rest of this series? Like, which soundtracks do you associate with the games first thinking about them, and which would you pick to remaster yourself if they're different? Pick the games in any order you want.
I mean, I've remixed every song from I've remixed a song from every game at this point of Final Fantasy for our YouTube channel. Like, but the ones that I think about in terms of I would like to do remixes for 7, 8, 9, and 10. 8 I've obviously already done, but 7 I'll probably do some work at some point. 9 I'm going to do next, and 10 I just love the soundtrack. Like those are the 4 soundtracks, 7 through 10, that grasped me the most, and 6 right behind it. Like, I love the soundtrack to 6. Like, specifically, you know, like when you play 6 for the first time, and you walk in towards Nash. And it's sort of got like the 3 it's got the 3 Magitech suits, and Terra's walking the snowfields coming down, and it's playing the track The Awakening. Like, I remember vividly playing that for the first time, and I remember the exact feeling. I remember exactly what it was. I was at my mum's house, when I was a kid, and I had this tiny little screen, like that, like
the curved screen.
Yeah, the old CRT, like a big yellow garish thing. And I remember having a PlayStation on that. I was sat on like a you know, like you have like your kitchen chairs, like the really, really tall kitchen chairs, which like hard as anything, and rain just coming down on like it was like in a little kind of like conservatory bit, like a small little conservatory with a plastic roof, and it was belting down rain. And I remember playing that. I just remember the exact feeling of playing it. So like 6 is also one that's like a big place. Yeah, AJ saying 10 is his favourite. There's no wrong answers. If you're picking 10 as your favourite, it's definitely not wrong. So it's fucking amazing game. Welcome in there.
So what about Final Fantasy IX? What would you say is your first track association with that game?
My basic bitch answer is "You Are Not Alone." But it's like it's such a pivotal moment in the game. Like,
yeah,
for me, obviously big FF9 spoilers here. For this game that came out in 2000.
I think a lot of people would jump straight to Memories of Life as well.
Melodies
of Life.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Don't worry, I can't help but do that. And it's because, right, I think it's a pivotal song in the game, a pivotal moment in the game, but also if you think about as a narrative device in Final Fantasy IX, the fact that Zidane,
the footballer,
Zinedine Zidane.
Yep.
Like if you think about like him as a character, it's such a risky thing to not find out your character's true intentions until 75% through the game, to find out their true backstory narrative and then find out who they really are. It's such a gamble, right, in terms of a narrative, and I think it's masterfully well done. I think like Zidane and Vivi are two of my favourite characters because they are so perfectly written together. I can't pick one of them individually because it's how the development runs alongside each other. It's perfect. Like for me, that is why 9 it's like neck and neck my favourite with my favourite game ever, 7, just because those two characters are so pivotal towards me and my experience in that game narratively.
I am so glad they returned to a traditional fantasy base for that game, and it was the first one that I picked up and owned. I think that the traditional I don't think that they could have written that story for any setting. They could have done it in a more modern setting like 8. They could have done it in like almost like a steampunk setting like 7, but it works so well in the setting they put it in. I'd say the scenes that stick out in my head for that game, it's definitely the cutscene of Blanc getting stuck in the forest.
Yeah.
And just the affection that Eco had for Zidane, I found comically hilarious. I thought that was fantastic. And I know they've done it in several different ways before this and as well as after this, but Quina being a blue mage but gaining abilities from eating the enemies as opposed to just learning them by seeing them was amazing.
I feel like they really thought about the characters and their place in the game narratively. I think my only sort of like negatives on the narrative is how like after the start of Disc 2, Freya's kind of an afterthought when she's such a big part of the first bits. Apart from that, it's a pretty flawless game for me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, just how they build up the entire world is fantastic. I love it, and like I think Sakaguchi wasn't that involved in 8 because I think he was working on Spirits Within at that point, and 9 was like his baby, so he just focused on those, and you can really tell that he put that love into 9 because it is just like such a perfect summation of the games that came before it.
Yeah, I agree with the fact that Freya and Amarant were pretty... They weren't really touched on after a certain point in the game, which I think is really disappointing, especially for like Freya had a decent build up. Amaranth was this bounty hunter that was meant to be after Sedaine, and then after they joined up, none of the rest of his story was like explored, and it was incredibly disappointing for me because I wanted to know more about that character. I might be wrong.
Amaranth, sorry.
Yeah, like I haven't played this game probably since the first playthrough. I've touched on it every now and then, but I've not done a full playthrough, so I might be wrong about some of this.
No, you're completely accurate. Right, you should do that on stream. Play some more on stream.
Well, my plan is to play through 1 through everything in chronological order. But yeah, so that's my plan, is to play all of them in chronological order on stream. The problem is finding the time to do it. I mean, I've got access to the Pixel remasters on Steam, which is nice. 7, not the remakes on Steam because I've got them on PlayStation at the moment, but 7, 8, 9, 10, 10-2, 11. Not that I can complete 11, so it'd be pointless playing through that.
You've obviously played 7 and 8 before, right?
I have never completed 7. Well, I have, just like not. It's one of those games that I started, and then something new came out, and I played that, and so by the time I got back to 7, I'd pretty much forgotten what I'd played through.
Oh my god! Please play it with Echo S7 and a bunch of other mods.
So what I'm doing now is, like, I haven't quite finished Rebirth yet, so I'm playing the original alongside the remake just for a perspective of what they've changed, and it's been quite interesting.
Okay, what sort of emotions have you felt?
I am enjoying confusement. Yes, I am.
That's a word, isn't it?
Enjoying the remake and Rebirth a lot. I know they're changing the story a fair amount. I think the manner in which they're doing it is fantastic. Especially, like, I've just not unlocked because he's not a playable character. I've just met Sid in Rebirth, just to give you an idea of where I'm up to.
Yeah, all right. That's good to know, so I don't spoil anything.
So I think the manner in which they're redoing the story is fantastic. Being able to keep the original one completely canon at the same point, as well as making this one canon, is very interesting.
It is for me. So I'm not going to get on my soapbox too much. Right, to preface this, there is, with both remake and rebirth, they both made me cry. I both got super emotional playing both of them. They're like both, like, 7 was a very important game to me, and essentially, like, it was in remake when you first get into Sector 7 and playing that bit. I loved that feeling, like playing the Anxious Heart music, and just seeing it like that, seeing Midgard like that was incredibly important to me, and there was a lot of moments throughout the game that I adored. Similarly with Rebirth, there were so many moments in that when I saw these places, or in my mind I imagined how it could look in modern graphics, and kind of just like experiencing those bits. And some parts in the narrative I absolutely adored and loved it. But with remake, like, I hated the whole kind of like nodding at the audience sort of thing of being like this is all spoilers for the end of remake, of being like, you're going to be fighting fate but also yourself, and kind of like, here's these whispers which are also fate, and kind of like, stop overcomplicating it. It's already a convoluted storyline. Don't make it more convoluted. And it's like, well, there's maybe these things where there's 3 different timelines, and like, you've got
the rest at this point.
you've got all of these Yeah, like all the different timelines where you've got the different type of the dog. So people are like talking about dog timelines and things like this, and I'm like,
that's what I was going to bring up. Stamp, because he's different types of dog in different timelines.
Like there's part of me that likes it, but I'm also sort of like, does it need to be done? Does it really add much to it? Like, I know the whole thing, like creative people want to make something creatively. They don't just want to spend the majority of 10 years remaking something exactly the same as it was. I can understand that from a creative's perspective of wanting to do that and challenge yourself narratively and in execution. And like, they've done an incredible job with the games. I'm just like, is it better or is it just different or less than? Like in terms of pure narrative, not talking about the gameplay mechanics. I think the gameplay is superb. I know it's not turn-based, but I love that action JRPG sort of style to it. I've really enjoyed it. I love hack and slash games. Like Devil May Cry is like probably one of the games I'm more skilled at. Like I'm not an amazing gamer or anything like that, but I'm really good at Devil May Cry games. So like that sort of like hack and slash thing and dodging mechanics is something that's very familiar to me. So combining two of my worlds was like it's not something that bothers me. I enjoy that. It's just purely from narrative. There's some parts of the story I just really don't enjoy as much as the original in any way, shape, or form, or I don't understand why they've done it. And that's all I can say without spoiling it for you. I want you to make your own mind up and enjoy it, because it seems like you really are. And there are a lot of people. I realise I don't speak for everyone. It's just my personal thoughts and feelings.
So talking about Final Fantasy VIII, what is your opinion on the fan theory that Squall dies at the end of Disc 1 and the rest of it is just a dream?
It's a bit edgelordy. I'm kind of like, it's like, oh yeah, it's cool. I love that people can go off and think about it, and people have gone down these rabbit holes. That's cool. Like you've written a good story if people can go and theory it to some point. That's one of the redeeming things about what they've done with Final Fantasy VII. It gets people talking about it. It gets people discussing their theories, and I love that about TV programs. But with 8, the Squall being theory, it's like, would it add anything? If that was the case, would that add anything to the story? Would it make it better? Would it make it worse? Kind of just the same.
Yeah.
It's a bit boring. Don't you reckon? If it's like, oh yeah, so yeah, actually the Disc 1's the only real part of the story, then after that the main character's dead, so nothing matters. It's kind of saying Disc 2's 3 and 4 are just completely irrelevant. So like, I don't know. To me, it doesn't add anything for that to be the case.
So what are your opinions on the story of Final Fantasy VIII? Because it has created quite a lot of dividing different opinions.
Yeah, divisive opinions. You were right first time.
I still want Zell to get his hot dog, man.
It gets in the end credits. He's there. He's got like 20 hot dogs, and he nearly choked to death. Like Final Fantasy VIII is imperfect. It had production hell, it had all these things, but it's like it's got warts and wrinkles. But I love it for all its warts and wrinkles. I think it's like I love that it's a bit weird. It's like that's one of the things that are my favourite things about 8. If you're playing it, when you're playing it, it feels different to every other Final Fantasy. There is no Final Fantasy like 8, and like AJ is saying, that there's lots wrong with it, but it's still amazing to play. He's completely right, and it's not just the playability of it. It's as a narrative, I really enjoy it. Like the GF part is the part that everyone always brings up. Yeah, it's probably my least favorite bit of the story, but it doesn't bother me that much.
I loved the junction system. I think that was amazing.
I agree.
And I also think it's absolutely hilarious how Selphie it's come about like post game. So Selphie, I can't remember her surname for the life of me.
Timid.
Timid. Yep. Is the first character in a game, as far as I am aware, that uses a social media platform in the game and is called Selfie and takes a lot of selfies. that is foreshadowing at peak. That is better than any Simpsons reference ever.
There you go. I'll put the spelling in the thing. Tilmit.
Yeah,
that is very true.
So talking of, like, I'm going to branch off to something I didn't expect to start talking about here. Game mechanics in the games. So Final Fantasy XII's Gambit system, I thought was amazing. I didn't know it appeared in any other game type until I played Dragon Age Origins. It's almost identical.
Yeah, I love Dragon Age.
Probably no coincidence that it was released a year or two after Final Fantasy XII.
Yep.
Obviously, the materia component of 7 is that game's unique system. What other systems in the games do you think work? Which ones didn't? Which ones needed more work?
So I think there's positive and negatives to each system. So if you think about like an inherently job system based thing, I think we can lump the junction system in there. Actually, no, I've completely confused myself there. I think the job system, so everyone can play everything, but with like a stock type of attacks, it has its place in it, but it does kind of mean that everyone is sort of going to be the same to some level. Like 7 has that. I do actually think, the junction system does kind of have that to something, like where you can customize it more, but it's still kind of inherently you're going to have someone who's like, this isn't your big hitter. I think you're kind of limited in a character sense. Like you can use whoever you want, which is good in some senses, but Sphere Grid I think kind of goes into the setting as junction, but like I think they're tiered and they exist in different ways, but no one's bad or good. I do like in 9 and 10 that everyone just has their stock attacks. It's a fixed job system. I do like that mechanic, but it also means, like with 9, it means I'm probably going to use the same part every single time I play that game, which is just because I'm used to that way of playing. That's not necessarily a good thing, but then with the other games where it is a system, like and you can customize it fully, I sometimes get spoiled by choice. Gambits were technically perfect, so you didn't have to click a button or you couldn't lose.
That is true, but a lot of work went into setting it up. Like you had to go and get all the different variables. It was essentially a big if this then that.
Yeah.
And if you got them in the wrong order, it could, if you put 1 above 2 and you meant to put it the other way around, it could really mess you up.
So James, who I do the YouTube channel with, is like one of my very, very best friends. Like, wouldn't have done any of these projects without him and his support. I talked about a load of people. I need to talk about James more. He basically said to me, him selling me on Final Fantasy XII, he's like, oh yeah, it's a fun game. You'll love it for the immersion and sort of like all these different weird creatures. But it's also, the battle system is Excel spreadsheet the game. You'll love it for that. Which, like, I think that one of the negatives to me playing it on stream has been like, as I'm playing it through I'm playing 12 through the first time on stream at the minute. I think the negative to that is that I keep not wanting to spend time on the gambits too much, because
that's half the game.
Because I know, but I keep thinking it would be terrible for people to watch me just like fiddling around in menus for half the stream.
Oh
which
no,
I end up doing.
Well, maybe it's just me, but I love that whole trial and error process of, oh shit, that didn't work. I now have to reload. Oh shit, I haven't saved for 5 hours.
Oh yeah, okay, fair enough. I probably do need to spend more time.
issue with 12, without giving you any spoilers, the story is absolutely fantastic, but in my opinion, when it felt like it was built up to its peak and finally getting somewhere, it ended very quickly. I don't know if that's just my opinion on it, but I thought like I was at I knew I was coming to a climax of some type, but when I thought I was what should be the midpoint of the story, it turned out to be quite near the end, which was a little.
I think that's about where I am.
It didn't give me the closure I wanted. It felt very rushed, even though it wasn't.
So, for me, I think 12 and 13 have a similar thing, where when you get narrative, it's good, but there's not enough of it. 12 is way better at it than 13 is. But with 13, I really struggled to keep on top of things. Who were who? And I thought a lot of the terminology sort of merged together. I thought that was a nightmare for 13.
Yeah.
With 12, I think I've been introduced to these places. I've learnt these places. I've gone around and spoken to hundreds of NPCs to learn what the world is like for them, what their personal experience is like. That immediately makes 12 a better game for me because you are immersed. Like, you get that immersion, know what the world's like. But then they don't give you that many stories involving these people where their lives are affected further after that. And that's like, I don't think there's been enough narrative for me so far. It might change that, but it's kind of like the narrative and world building they've done to the point I'm at in the game is fantastic, and I love it. It just needs more of it.
So a goal for me on this podcast, and I really hope this is fantastic foreshadowing on my part, because I'd love for it to happen, is I would love to get Gideon Emery on this podcast, the voice actor for Balthier.
Yeah. He's amazing.
Given that he's also done work on Dragon Age, he's done work in World of Warcraft, he's done work on the original base game for Realm Reborn. That is a personal goal of mine, and I hope that works out.
We've got to get there. I need to look at his IMDb and see what.
Oh, he's done so much; it's ridiculous. Like, he's popped up in some. I'm completely sidetracking now. He's popped up in some TV shows. I don't know if you've ever watched Burn Notice at all. It's a fantastic TV show. I'd fully take the time to go watch it. If it's got Bruce Campbell in it.
Yeah, nice.
Like, he was in, I think it was 2, maybe 1 episode of that, just as a side character that's related to one of the main characters. And because I've never seen him before, like, as a person, he's obviously got a very distinct voice. I didn't know it was him because he puts on an Irish accent. And I can't imagine Balthier with an Irish accent. Like, I know it's his job, but it's a completely different voice. And
yeah.
The range he has is amazing. And I am glad that, although he hasn't done too much recent work, I'm glad he's had a very good working relationship with Square Enix.
Yeah, I was just looking at his IMDb then. He's done absolutely shitloads.
Oh, so much.
Yeah, like, I'm terrible at remembering voice actor names with stuff. Like, it's something I'm trying to get better at, because I'm working with really talented voice actors. And I hear him talking about people all the time, and I sort of get lost. I'm like, I should probably pay attention to this.
Destiny 2. He voices the leader of the Blood Elves. I can't pronounce the name, so I'm not even going to attempt it. In World of Warcraft.
I just saw that.
But yeah, that is somewhere I'd quite like to go with this, and hopefully it'll work at some point in the future.
Fingers crossed for you, dude. I hope you do.
So, getting back, like, we're going off on tangents here. I love it. How do you feel just talking about 7 and the remake? It's completely different in terms of obtaining summoner materia. What is your opinion on Chadley?
Chadley can go fuck himself. So this has been a running joke between me and a streamer called Kaino Michi. I watched her play through like most of Rebirth because I played it on stream as well. It was the first game I streamed next to 13.
Yep.
And I played through it reasonably quickly because I got to a point where I got sick of the side quests. So I pushed through the rest of it. And then so I could carry on watching her play through it, and she was doing every single
quest in every area.
She went on it, and she took her time, and yeah, it was fantastic to watch her play it. But any time Chadley came up, it was just my running joke, just being fucking Chadley. Just any time he appeared on the screen, fucking Chadley. I'm like, it's a good mechanic. He's a great mechanic for the game, but I'm also like, right, that guy is a Shinra AI who is gathering all this data on you. If in the final part he is not a super boss, like, they have missed the trick.
Yep. And another thing that I like that they brought back, and I think they've improved on tenfold. I spoke about this in a recent post. I could play the hell out of Fort Condor.
Yeah,
I
like the game.
I wish, I don't know if it is at some point, but I wish, like, where you go around obviously playing the card game, I wish that you could do that with Fort Condor. I wish it had more of a presence.
Did you play Intergrade?
I have it. I haven't played it yet.
Okay, well, it's the main side game in that.
Oh, nice.
You get to do that in Intergrade. That's not giving anything away. Like,
no.
Make sure you play it properly, and you'll love it. It's a slightly different version of it, but I loved it.
And I know I'm not at the point yet in Rebirth, and I don't know how true this is, but I read that when they were recording, and one of the reasons why the game is almost so big is because when Red 13, Nanaki, when you go obviously visit where he's from and his voice changes, in case you did that first and then went back to revisit all the side quests, they re-recorded all of his lines, and almost each quest has a different file because they had to re-record it just in case you visited in that order.
Making sure that voice actor got paid.
Yeah. I think that attention to detail is fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. That is great. I don't think that change in voice added much for me.
No,
it was okay. Like, have you haven't got to that point yet? So
I haven't got to that point yet.
I'm not going to go into it, but for me, it was neither here nor there. It was like, that's cute, but like, I don't know. It was one of those where I didn't mind it. I didn't hate it. It was like it was there.
Just one of those things.
Yeah, but I'd love to know your opinion when you get to it. How you take it. Like, when you finish it, make sure you tell me what your thoughts were.
Right. So moving on from that, we've talked about the different mechanics in each of the games. We've spent a lot of time on 7, a lot of time on 8. Sorry, quite a bit of time on 9. Jumping back to your mods, what do you see as the future of like modding? Because obviously games like 10 onwards are still held to a pretty high standard, even given today's standard of games. The HD remasters have come out. They've had audio improvements as well. Like, what more do you think mods could add to these games they're still old? They're still almost considered retro. I mean, Final Fantasy X was released on PS2, and it's still holding up in standards to today's games. So where do you see the future of modding and audio modding going with these games that are still at a pretty good standard, that they don't necessarily need them for newer players to go back and enjoy them?
I think it's going to be gradual. Like with everything, it'll be gradual improvements in different things like mechanics. Like, if I think about, I've got to focus on what I know, which is using FFNX driver, and So if I think about the improvements that I've requested for things that Chuodin, who's the main developer for it, what he's put in there for and some of the functions that I've requested for us to do in the future. Like if I think about the ambience layer, at the minute it's not localized. So you go onto that screen, it's going to stay where it is. It's going to stay in the speakers. It's not going to change volume if you walk around it. The thing that I want to be able to do is then add an additional layer that does that. So if you walk close to the fountain in Banham Garden, it gets louder. Things like that. So for audio, adding those additional features to add those to add additional immersion to it. I think the thing that people like myself should be doing is improving on adding that additional immersion and a fan experience and player experience. That's the thing that it should always be garnered to. It should always be making it better for the person playing the game, making it more immersive, making it a better experience. That's what it should always be. And that doesn't go just for modding, that goes for game development as a whole.
So what do you think the chances are of in the future, maybe, say, Final Fantasy VII? I mean, it's going to need work, but of it being modded into like a first-person VR game, do you think games
which version? Remake, Rebirth?
Any of them? Do you think that is the direction that modding will go?
I think it could be. Like if you look at, I think you're more likely to get it for Rebirth and Remake because they're built in a Unreal Engine, so it already has VR support within that. Like, it wouldn't be that difficult to do that compared to something else. Like that is very possible to do it in Unreal, but it would be a nightmare when you're in battle. Like,
yes,
I don't understand. Like, you're effectively applying something like Skyrim's mechanics to Rebirth or Remake. I don't think it would work for that. I think it'd have to go back out into third person. But walking around, you might be able to have an optional mechanic where you can go into first person. I think that would be able to be done. I don't think it'd be the most difficult thing because it's built in Unreal, and I've worked in Unreal a bit. It's possible. It's definitely possible.
So aside from obviously the unannounced 9 that everyone is almost 100% sure they are remaking, even outside of the Final Fantasy series, are there any other games that you'd like to see get like the remake Rebirth treatment?
8.
Obviously 8.
I mean,
it needs it.
Like it's the one that would benefit for it most narratively because it's evident that there were different teams who were working on it. The left hand wasn't talking to the right hand, and you can definitely tell that when you're playing it. I think there are points that could be fleshed out, and I mean, like, just on the terms of lore, I would like with what they've done on 7. One of my most favourite things about that is learning about all the different lore. Like, this is a part that I know is not going to spoil you because you've already played it. In Junon, when you're doing all the things with the towers, and you're doing all the things with the springs, and you're getting all the different information on the lore, the history of the Junon Empire, and things like that, you're getting all that expansive lore. I think 8 would benefit from that so much. Learning about Hein's era and learning about the entire Central continent, like all of those elements being fleshed out would be incredible. I would love it for that. I'd want them to keep the junction system, maybe refine it a little bit, but like, I genuinely like the junction system. I like the fact you can make Irvin completely broken by midway through after you've just met him, and just keep spamming his limit break and destroy everyone in your path. Like, I love that. It's ridiculous. Like, there are parts of it that I could really do with being redone. Like that whole part with the GFs and forgetting their memory just kind of seems like a bit of an arse pull at some parts. I think it could be fleshed out a bit. Like, all those different elements could just be improved ever so slightly.
So do you think it would benefit from being turned into an action RPG like 7, or do you think it should remain as turn-based?
I think could work as an action RPG. If you think about being able to swing a gunblade around, that's cool as fuck. But like, there's no wrong answer. There's no wrong answer. It's down to the person who's playing it. My answer will be different to anyone else's. but I think there's cool elements to it going that style, the action RPG, and there's something to be said about keeping it turn-based, because that is what brought a lot of us fans to the dance. That is why a lot of us loved those games. You could take your time, you could think about it a different way. You don't have to be completely on there button mashing and blocking and that high stress environment of gaming. That's for me a large reason why I love turn-based games. I can just put ATB weight on. I can sit there, put the control down, and be like, right, what the fuck am I going to do here?
Yep.
So there's something to be said about that.
I think 9, in my opinion at least, needs to remain turn-based if they do it.
Yeah.
I don't think that would work as well, given like everyone. I know technically everyone has a set class in 7, like how they were intended to be played, but with how customizable they are with materia, I don't think it would work and have the same impact if 9 went action RPG. I think it would be very different and very difficult to play that.
Yeah. I agree. I do think I also think there's something to be said. Do you think? Let me ask you this question. Do you think Square have purposefully leaked these little tidbits of information?
I don't know, like, if it's come from Square, like just going by how Yoshi P is with 14, how he leaks information and how he's historically leaked information, especially with like his t-shirts at public appearances. 99% of the time, they are a reference to something that's being done, is about to be released, or will be released. To the point now where no matter what public appearances, people are analysing his t-shirt, to the point where it's the 1% where it has nothing to do with anything, people are coming up with so many theories.
Yeah.
He has released a statement as well on Final Fantasy IX being remade, saying that
it would take more one installment.
Outright saying that he has nothing to do with it, but if he was the one, he'd do it like this.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's him saying, I'm the one doing it, because if it was his studio doing it, I have no doubt it would be an absolutely fantastic game. Yeah. And essentially a 1-to-1 remake of 9.
You could, like... there were rumours that it was being done externally, and Square weren't happy about its progress or its standards, so brought it back in-house. I remember seeing that, but outside of that, I've not really looked into it too much, because I don't want to get my hopes up. I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'm just going to wait until it's been announced, and then if it looks, I'm going to play it whatever. I'm going to buy it on release. I'm going to play it. I'm probably going to cry. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, we're doing a voice mod for it anyway. So,
so I distinctly remember the announcement for Final Fantasy VII Remake. I had got home from work. My partner hadn't moved over yet. She was still in America. I was in my flat by myself, and I booted up the computer. I was going to log on to 14, and clicked YouTube whilst my character was loading in, and I remember screaming like a fucking little fangirl. It is the sole reason I upgraded my PlayStation 3 to a PlayStation 4, is so I could play Final Fantasy Remake. Just for the next game to be released on PlayStation 5.
So do you remember, like, back in, it's either 2004, 2005, I think it was 2005, there was an E3 tech demo for the PS3 that showed an HD recreation of the opening to Final Fantasy VII, and they did it in high res. It looked fucking incredible, and they were like, "Oh, yeah, this isn't us announcing anything; it's just showing off the power of the PS3." And then you heard nothing about the remake until 2018, 2019, when it was in established development, and then it came out fucking 15 years later in 2020.
Yep.
And like, I waited that long. That wait is what pushed me into finding out about mods, because I got so impatient about it, because they teased us like that and then didn't deliver on it for 15 years.
Yeah.
For
And
15 years.
If you think I can wait that long for a Final Fantasy game, I feel bad for people that were waiting for Duke Nukem.
Yeah, that was teased.
And especially people that are now going to be waiting for Elder Scrolls 6, because that's going to be time.
It's the old Half-Life 3, isn't it?
Yeah. But again, it's an interesting question to bring up. Obviously, people expect announcements now. They want to know what developers are working on in advance, so they know what to expect. Bethesda had obviously already announced Starfield as being a completely new IP. People are excited for that. Obviously, outside of ESO, there's not much else they're working on. Obviously, Fallout 76. Do you think it's the fan expectation that pressured Bethesda, not only Bethesda, but other companies announcing games that early on in development to the point where it doesn't even have a set window for a release that they can announce?
I think it's meant to be the answer you are expecting from this, but I think the problem doesn't come from early announcement. The problem is what's happening with the game industry as a whole at the minute. There is 40% of the workforce working in big studios than there was in 2020 when this massive gaming boom happened. If you think about the sales, like the only industries that thrived and grew and exploded during the pandemic was the gaming industry, because everyone could still work from home. These gaming shows could still break, could still release. It didn't stop anything. It sped it up. But all these massive conglomerates bought so many smaller companies like EA, just swallowing up Bethesda. And then what happens? What is the first thing that happens when there is a merger? They look at both sides and see, right, who have we got that's in the same job? And one of them goes. And one of them goes. And one of them goes. And they've done that across the board. And it's not just EA that's done it. It's every single larger company that's swallowed a smaller gaming studio. They've got rid of people who are in duplicate jobs. What that happens is you've got 60% less of the skill in the industry as a whole. But it's also why indie games are doing so much better and getting such high quality indie games coming out now, because there is a severe lack of workforce. If you still had those people working in those positions that have produced results and produced these fantastic games, such as Doom Eternal, like thinking about Bethesda, then there would not be a problem with bottlenecking in production. There would not be bottlenecking. They'd be expanding. They could release these games on time. It's just the companies wouldn't make as much money to be able to report as big profits. And
I understand
don't
it
give me
from
some capitalism.
I understand it from a business perspective. I also understand it from the fact that if you have people in duplicate jobs, you don't essentially need both of them. But they're also, not only are they getting rid of a duplicate job, the person that they have left in that job now has a double workload. And I think
how can they
maybe
not micromanage?
They don't necessarily need the two people in the same job, but they need the support network there for the person that's left in it to allow them to work to the same capacity and standard that they were before they had the increased workload.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, how can you not end up micromanaging your workload if you've got twice the amount? It's impossible. And if you don't get results, you're probably going to get fired. Like, I think the gaming industry is in a massive transformative stage at the minute, which is going to create these issues across the board in every different avenue of gaming. I think it's going to happen. It's why you get these day one releases, which are so buggy. It's why there is day one DLC and stuff like this. There's always a day one patch. There's always day one DLC, both of which are as a result of corporate mergers, and then swallowing smaller companies.
So
But I'll get off my soapbox now. But yeah, that's something where it's like I'd now probably, unless Square come knocking at my door and say, hey, would you like to do some sound design on Final Fantasy VII Part 3? Like, I'm not going to be looking for. I don't really want to work for a bigger game company. I'd prefer to work for a smaller game company, indie studios and stuff like that.
You mentioned DLC, just transitioning into something different. I remember a time, and it was a bloody long time ago, just something as simple as playing Tekken 3, and there was no DLC for Tekken 3. To get the extra content, you had to complete the game. You had to complete the game with certain characters to unlock certain skins, to unlock new characters. Now, it's all paid for. Yeah, 90% of it is cosmetic, and I understand the business side of it. I don't like it.
No.
There are unlockables don't exist, and it's frustrating.
I had that problem with Tekken 7. I've not played Tekken 8 yet. When I was the same. Tekken 3 for me, when that game was getting hyped, I got the UK PlayStation magazine that used to come out. I remember they had this like 4-page thing talking about Tekken 3, and I read that until it was falling apart. I got a demo of it. I played it to death. Like, just for me, as Tekken 3 was a massive thing for me. So like playing through that and unlocking the characters you go in, doing like Tekken Force mode and all that stuff was a proper challenge, and it was something I loved. I loved unlocking stuff and challenging myself to do it. But I remember in like Crash Team Racing, you have to do like all those crazy time trial things to be able to unlock nitrous oxide.
The new riders,
like, and just I think that is something that's kind of has been missing in those sort of games. I hope, like playing Tekken 7 and just like opening it up and you've got every character unlocked. Like, I don't want this because I'm spoiled for choice. I'm less likely to play this. Whereas if I unlock the new character, I will then probably play with them the next go round. I'll be like, okay, let's do that. Play through the story with them, get their video, find out who their rival is.
The closest thing I can liken to unlockables now are battle passes, but unfortunately, 90% of the time you've got to pay for the battle pass to be able to use it.
And it's never a character from in the game. If you get a battle pass, it's like in Call of Duty here, you can play as Rhea Ripley, you can play as WWE wrestler in it. Like, okay, right.
Well, that pretty much transitions into what I was going to ask about next. How, obviously, quite a lot of Final Fantasy characters have appeared in the Kingdom Hearts games. They're both owned by the same company. Cloud has appeared in Smash Brothers. What other franchises do you think could benefit from an appearance from Final Fantasy games, and vice versa? Like, I know it would be incredibly difficult to fit a pre-established character into a Final Fantasy game.
I mean, obviously Dissidious done it just within Final Fantasy as well.
Yeah.
Where it's combining that, but I've never played Kingdom Hearts because I didn't like the idea of mixing Disney characters with Final Fantasy. That was enough for me. I know, like, people probably come with pitchforks and torches now, but for me, it never attracted me. It was never something that I wanted to play. It was never something that interested me enough to be like, right, I'm going to play this. I don't want to play a game. It's Donald Duck. I don't. It's not for me. I think if there's a good reason in the narrative to have it's 490. Kingdom Hearts is a Final Fantasy game, and I'll die in that hill. Yeah, I think you're probably absolutely right.
I think I tend to agree. I think it was, for purposes of marketing, it was marketed as a Disney game. From playing the game, how in depth the story is, how in depth the lore is, it is ridiculous. I think it is I agree. It's a Final Fantasy game that features Disney characters. It's definitely not the other way around.
Might do it as like a sub goal or something. Maybe I'll get people to like. This is my like.
Don't get me wrong.
Goal.
Like, obviously, all the worlds you visit are Disney worlds, and a lot of the IP is Disney, but it doesn't play. Like if you didn't know what Disney was, it doesn't play as a Disney game. It plays as a Final Fantasy game, and I know that's because it's been developed by Square Enix. Yeah. But they could have quite easily gone, "Oh, this is a Disney game. Look, here's squirrel with big feet."
Yeah, fair enough. I think, but I do know what Disney is, and I do know what Final Fantasy is, and in my head it's like it's not letting me merge those together. So I've never done it. I've barely seen anything from it. I'm not talking badly of it in any way, shape or form. I've just not played it, and I probably won't for a long time. And going back to your original question, I think if there is a good narrative reason for it to happen, it's not a bad thing. It's definitely not something that shouldn't happen. It's if the narrative suits it, it makes sense, and it's not contrived. I think that's the important thing. If it's easy to make that sort of narrative contrived, of forcing characters together, like look at the Avengers as a franchise, kind of what it is. It's like, right, let's get all these micro properties and then just merge them together for one movie where you'll get like 3 seconds of all these people show up on screen and doing their big battle pose. Like, as long as it's not something like that where it feels like, okay, they're just
So I know they've kind of done it with several. Like, for example, have you played World of Final Fantasy?
No.
So, World of Final Fantasy is pretty much Pokemon, for lack of a better word. You capture
I've heard
monsters.
this.
Yeah, but I haven't played through a lot of it. But other Final Fantasy characters obviously appear in World of Final Fantasy. Do you think there would be an instance where they could take maybe one or two of the main characters from each of the Final Fantasies and make a brand new game with its own narrative, yet keeping the established history of the original characters?
Again, that's kind of what Dissidia is. Like, Dissidia is sort of like that, where they are combining main characters from Final Fantasies and giving them their own narrative. Like, I've not played a massive amount of it. I kind of like looked at little bits and pieces of it, but it is kind of that. I think there definitely is a place for it. It does sort of feel like fan fiction on some level. It does kind of feel like that. That might be a me thing again, but yeah, I think there's a place for it.
And just something that I kept on meaning to go back to. I'm going to have to go back to it now. It doesn't have any relevance on this current conversation, but I don't see us transitioning back to it.
No problem.
Final Fantasy IX, as far as I'm aware, is the first Final Fantasy game, if not the only one in the main series, that was multiplayer. Did you know that?
Was it multiplayer?
It was. So you could plug a second controller in and assign that second controller, assign characters to that second controller in battles.
That's cool. No, I didn't know that. Maybe I did. Maybe it's in my brain somewhere, but I've definitely never done it.
No, that's what me and my brother used to do. We used to pick our characters, and one of us would just go through the story, and that's how. I think that is how we started off, both liking Final Fantasy.
Do you have an older brother, or is it your younger brother?
Younger. I am the eldest of 5.
Oh wow! Okay, busy household.
Yes, very busy household. But that game series has stuck with us to the point where, we have sunk. If it was possible to sink more hours than we've existed into a game series, it would be Final Fantasy.
That's cool. Yeah, I think probably the same as me. Metal Gear's probably after that. I've played a lot of strategy games, like Age of Empires, Dawn of War, which was a Warhammer 40k one. I still play that with crazy mods. There's a mod called Unification for that, which is fucking insane. Command and Conquer Age of Empires. I've sunk lots of hours into those. 4 siblings.
Yep.
Mike.
So with you're talking about strategy. Have you? You said you've played Tactics.
I haven't played Tactics.
You haven't played Tactics. You should. Number one. Have you played like their other strategy games like Triangle Strategy and that sort of stuff?
I didn't know that Triangle Strategy existed until about 3 days ago, and I've seen it somewhere. That's the thing. Go play it now. Well, which one? Final Fantasy Tactics.
Oh. Whoops, wrong one. There we go.
Everyone who has played Tactics, like literally, my first thing of e-release is Final Fantasy XII. Like I will get there at some point.
So
I will do.
Maybe you could clarify this for me, Fallen. Final Fantasy Tactics and Final Fantasy Tactics Advance are two separate games, and then one was made into War of the Lions, Final Fantasy Tactics War of the Lions, which was then released on Androids and mobiles. Like, how many Final Fantasy Tactic games are there? Is it just the two, but they have been remade and remastered so many different times that there's thousands of them out there now?
That's what I struggled with when I was looking at it as well. I have no idea, so I'll be interested to hear that. But yet, people seem to get really frustrated if you've not played Tactics. But maybe I'll get around to it at some point. I might not, just to annoy you, Fallen.
Yeah, so we've briefly spoken about what mods you're going to be doing in the future. You're going to be doing 9 next, and then you might go back and do 7, but you said you didn't want to touch it because it's obviously been done a lot.
7 gets a lot of love.
7 does get a lot of love. I feel a lot of that is because of how much of a breakthrough the game was in terms of gaming standards. I feel that if 7 was 8 and 8 was 7, 8 would be getting all the love, like what we know as 8, because of how much of a breakthrough it was. I don't mean this in a negative way to 7 at all. I don't think it gets the love it gets because of the narrative, the story, and the game. I think it's just the massive jump that the game was.
There is a huge nostalgia bias. There is absolutely a huge nostalgia bias. I can't say that 3 times fast.
Yeah.
If you think like the fan base is rabid. Like,
yeah.
If I think about my experiences with modding, like I'm in a big server and I see the difference in S7, 8 and 9 communities from just a modding perspective. Like with 8, you generally get people who are just happy that 8 gets any attention at all, because it's the black sheep of the family.
But
like, you are happy that everyone gets attention. But 7, the fan base are pretty fucking horrible.
But
because
that's the point I'm trying to make. Is it getting the attention because it was the first one released?
Yeah, there is the first one on
PlayStation.
The first one that era, the first 3D one, shall we call it? Yeah, there is absolutely that to a large extent. But does it negate people's thoughts and feelings? No, but it should always be considered. I think with me, a large part of it is because it was in my formative years. It was my first RPG. It was a lot of firsts for me. You're probably right. 8 would be getting a lot of attention, but would it have got to the same highs as 7? We will never know. We will never know. It's purely conjecture. Same with 9. If that was the first, probably would have. Probably would be the biggest RPG of all time. But that's what 7 is. 7 is the biggest RPG of all time.
Yep.
Like it doesn't. There isn't one that has a bigger fan base, in my opinion. Can anyone name a bigger one?
Definitely not.
And going back to the thing you said about you said other projects.
Yes.
I'll be doing 9 next, but I'm not really sure after that. Anything else? Maybe we'll see. Like I don't know yet.
I just had a train of thought that's just gone just gone completely.
Sorry, I talked over you. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's all right. It happens. It happens even as I'm talking through my sentence. I will forget what I'm trying to say, and it just goes.
I do that. I do that all the time.
It was only the other day that I was made aware that Super Mario RPG was actually made by Square. That is not a fact that I knew.
I didn't know that. I just learned that then. What we did learn the other day was Mario has more games than any other series. It has 200 different Mario titles. That
doesn't surprise me.
That was because of AJ Watson there in chat. Who just said, "Fuck Mario, awful character." Debatable, but I'm not a massive Mario fan. Nor I like Zelda, but I've not played that much of it because I never owned a Nintendo console. I've gone back and played that. They're comfy, cozy games to play, but I don't have that. That's the one that I don't have that nostalgia bias for.
Yeah.
I can still look at them and be like, they're fantastic games with rich worlds and great stories and great gameplay, but I don't have the same level of attachment to everyone else. So I guess I can kind of see that thing from the outside that people have with Final Fantasy VII. I have that with Zelda. I'd never say it's a terrible game, AJ.
So with regards to, a lot of gamers now who still play Final Fantasy games have that original connection to. I'll put the cutoff at I say even 10's too late because people who played 10 had the connection before. So like anything like pre-9, even before that, anything before 7, a lot of the people still playing Final Fantasy games have the nostalgia and the connection to the original numbered titles. How difficult do you think it is, and how much of a different experience do you think people who don't have that prior knowledge of the series, like, coming in and playing the games? Because Final Fantasy 15 was marketed as the Final Fantasy for non-Final Fantasy fans.
Yeah, I don't think they pulled that off in execution, but I think I think Final Fantasy 14 is that, to be honest.
Yes,
like I know this is big music too, but I know so many people who play Final Fantasy 14 who have never played another Final Fantasy, who don't listen to these other references. Like the person I referenced earlier, my friend Winter Pebbles, he's a Final Fantasy 14 player who's now going back and playing the other Final Fantasies, but he's been a Final Fantasy 14 player for, I think, the better part of a decade. And I think that is the game for the non-Final Fantasy players that has introduced people to it. It's kept Square afloat during some difficult times when they have made some maybe questionable decisions, which is debatable. But I do think that Final Fantasy 14 is just that in terms of like an MMORPG.
You're saying 14 is the game for people to get into other Final Fantasies. Even though I have played a lot, and I know I'm not the most knowledgeable when it comes to Final Fantasy by any stretch of the imagination, but the games and the facts that I do have knowledge about are so in depth. There are still so many things in Final Fantasy 14 that I don't realise are nods and references to other games.
Mm-hmm. 5 and 4.
Yep. Like, just even going back and replaying the games that I already have played and I have knowledge of, to then go, well, that is actually from that game, and I didn't know that. I mean, there's the big ones that everyone knows, like Cloud of Darkness is a big boss. Crystal Towers from one of the games, and these are common knowledge, but the small little hints are fantastic. I think 16 is also another one people are going to use as a gateway into the series, given it's just been released on PC as well.
I think 16 would be accessible in the sense of people who like their sort of like grim, dark, medieval stuff.
Yeah,
it might be more accessible from that, and they tended to go with different types of voice actors on it. They tended to go with more like famous voice actors. They went for a different approach in production, and I do appreciate that.
I do like the fact that they picked up
Can I just pick up something in chat a second from here?
Yep.
So both Fallen Angel and AJ, I think, have both missed the context of what we were saying about 14, because we weren't talking about that being an entry point for it. We were talking about that being a game that people have picked up who don't play the Final Fantasy games, because it's an MMO. You've got so many people. Like, there was an influx when World of Warcraft completely screwed up one of their releases, where it pushed a lot of the fans of World of Warcraft towards another MMO. That MMO was Final Fantasy XIV. There was a massive big burst of new fans that came in around 2021. People who had never played Final Fantasy before. So whereas I don't think that is the perfect entry point for Final Fantasy, I don't think it is at all. I think it has been a big entry point to people because of that, because of circumstance, which then will lead people to the other games because of bits. I think the best entry point is Final Fantasy X. The best entry point for me, the one that I tell people to play, is the first one, because it has voice acting. I think it's an easier entry point to someone who's not played a turn-based game where they have to read screens on there. That's if I tell someone who's not played a JRPG for the first time to play a Final Fantasy or an RPG for the first time,
it's 10.
It's Final Fantasy X.
Yeah, I agree. Final Fantasy 16 is doing wonders, and I am so glad that Yoshi P did such a fantastic job on it. And they got almost local voice actors. Not like, I don't think I've ever heard a Yorkshire Sid before in my life.
I love
it's
that.
amazing. Is there anything else you sort of want to touch on at all?
You were talking about 16. Before I went back to chat, I'll finish point on that because I never probably replied to you. So, Final Fantasy 16. I've not played through it yet. That's what I'm going to do next on Twitch after I finish playing through FF12, which should be in the next couple of weeks, I think. I'm going to do that as playthrough. I'm not going to play the PC version, I don't think, because I think it's going to absolutely fuck my PC if I'm running OBS and a bunch of other stuff. So I'm probably going to play it on PS5 and just use my capture card. Agreed that Clive is a shit name. It's like maybe that's a British thing, because it's like, oh, Clive, he sits down the pub. He's the guy who sits in the corner drinking real ale and farting loads.
Well, that's another point here that Fallen Angels brought up. Not that one. That one. The transition from being able to name your characters, because you could even rename Tidus, however the fuck you want to say it, in 10. We have now transitioned to a point where we don't get the opportunity because their names are voice acted. Yet it was a possibility in 10 because they reworked the script around it. Do you think that's something they should jump back to? Or do you think they should keep going with the designated names?
I fully get the whole 1 in 10 character. I just think it's really difficult. I think it's really difficult to achieve if you're having voice acting. If you think about some of the points in 10, they had to go around their back to get to their elbow, sort of thing, and it felt really uncomfortable that they just weren't saying his name. Like, it didn't make sense to be like, oh yeah, who are you?
And
he doesn't say his name.
The amount of division there is over how to pronounce his name now because of that.
I just say both. I'm tired of this. Although I'm not going to touch that one because I'll make AJ angry again. And I don't know. I call him Tidus, but whatever. Call him what you want. Like, I think it makes it really difficult that he's such an extroverted character who talks about himself all the time, not being like, oh yeah, I'm Tidus, star player of the Xanaka Naves. He doesn't say his name. I think it's quite difficult to achieve that in dialogue and writing it. So,
yeah,
exactly what AJ just said then. There's a scene with Yuna and she names all the Guardians and then skips Tidus and goes everyone. It's ridiculous. Yeah, like, it makes it more difficult because of that. Yes, it'd be great to be able to name the characters. It'd be great to have that level of immersion where they've written the name of every single character. But if you look at in Dragon Age, so going back to Inquisition, oh, you're the Herald of Andraste. instead of the Herald. So you can call yourself what you want. They call you the Herald. They give you this pseudonym. It kind of works. It kind of is what it is. That's not the worst way to do it. But
Yeah.
also, I think just do it the way they've done it, and just like you can't give options of every single name. It would take far too long to play a game when you've already got like the increased developmental cycles. It'd be way too difficult to be able to do it.
All right. So in this point, does anyone going to do a small Q&A if anyone wants to throw any questions into chat? And whilst that is going on and people are coming up with the questions first, would you like to let everyone know where they can find you on your different YouTube channels, what they're about, and all that sort of stuff?
Okay, yeah, sure. So you can find me on Twitch as MikeDoesAudio, all one word, MikeDoesAudio. I do on Sundays and Mondays, I do playthroughs of games, first playthroughs of games, doing Final Fantasy XII in a minute, then moving on to Final Fantasy XVI afterwards. I also run a YouTube channel called Final Fantasy and Chill, and that's and with an ampersand. You can find that as at Final Fantasy Chill. We are currently 17 subscribers away from 10,000 subs. It's taken 3 years to get to this point. We're really, really nearly there. We do a lot of remixes of Final Fantasy music. I've done a couple of Chrono Trigger ones on there as well, and Chrono Cross. But we're getting there. We're getting there. We're pushing to 10k at the minute. We should hopefully get it in the next couple of days. So if you haven't subscribed, please do. I would love to be able to record us hitting 10k on screen.
Right. So we've got our first question from AJ. Do you think Final Fantasy games have improved or declined over time? What are some elements from older games you miss, and what do you appreciate about newer titles?
Good question, AJ. So I think certain elements have improved a bit, which is just a function of time passing and greater technology having existed. I think the environments are fantastic. I don't think they're as memorable as they to be. Like, if an open world game, you can only there's only so many fields you can do and make them feel unique. There's only so many things you can do it. You just have to kind of add things that are familiar to those games to put them in. Older games, I miss turn-based. I do miss turn-based being a large part of it. I do enjoy the Rebirth battle system. I think it's a lot of fun, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss turn-based in Final Fantasy games as main titles. I think they've moved away from that. I'm looking in the sense that the direction they've moved in is something that I love, because I love Devil May Cry games, and it's the same combat director for Final Fantasy XVI as it is for Devil May Cry 5. And I love the battle system in Devil May Cry 5, so I imagine I will love it in 16. So I do miss turn-based, but at least it's moving in a direction that I like. And what do I appreciate about the newer titles? It is sound design. Obviously, it's my gimmick. Like, I do audio. Like, the sound design and ambience and the immersion that is created from sound design is far and away vastly improved from 7, 8, 9, 10 because of the limitations of hardware. Not because the people who worked on it didn't have skill. It's just they couldn't do it. They didn't have the space to be able to add ambient sound design. They didn't have the ability to create different versions of every sound effect for each hit, so you're not just having the same attack sound for it. You don't have the opportunity to have 10 different sound effects that it pulls from for each one. Like, because of technology, they can do so much more with it. That is something that is always going to be better about new titles. The sound is always going to be better, and you cannot prove me. You can't convince me it's any different. Do you say 14 coming to an end with its success?
Just before we jump onto that one,
sorry.
That's all right. I think the games in terms of quality have improved. What I miss from the older games, like in terms of elements, if it wasn't titled Final Fantasy XV, I would not have considered it a Final Fantasy game. There were so many things missing. Obviously, Chocobo's there, Sid was there. I just think they lost quite quite a lot of what makes a Final Fantasy game. It was more an action RPG that probably could have been its own new IP. I don't think it would have got the attention that it deserved if it did that. But I don't think it detracted from the Final Fantasy brand. I just don't think it did what it could have done.
I think the same can be said for 12, 13, and 15.
The fact that one of the first things that I noticed in 15 was the distinct lack of Moogles.
There's no Moogles in 8. Well,
there are no Moogles.
There's Mini-Mog as an item, that's it.
Yep. But at that point, they'd become so ingrained with... I mean, there weren't in 10 either. They were just Lulu's dolls.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that I think, again, I might be misremembering this, that Moogles didn't appear till the Chocomog Festival in 15.
I don't even remember that. I played 15 on release.
So I also played 15 on release, and what I remember I haven't played it fully through since release. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it's chapter 5 when you're going through the bridge, everything gets icy and you do the whole Shiva thing. From what I have recall being told, that chapter was shorted in development because they had to make the release date, and it was then completely rewritten for a patch. So the game completely changed from what I remember playing through.
Yeah, I've not gone back to it yet.
I'd like to echo you on the
edition.
I'd like to echo you on the point of I miss turn-based, but again, the games wouldn't flow. The newer games wouldn't flow as well. But just to touch on AJ's point, Baldur's Gate does it. It's shown it can be done if it's done right.
Didn't that win Game of the Year?
It did, and a damn good game it is.
Go on then.
So we've got a question from Fallen Angel now. Do you see 14 coming to an end with its success? Do you think they should work on another MMO or just continue on 14? I think, considering with the release of Dawn Trail and the end of Endwalker, considering they have gone A Realm Reborn, Heavensward, Stormblood, Shadowbringers, and Endwalker just to finish one story arc, whereas most MMOs do one story arc per expansion. I think they have so much more life in the game. The fact that this Dawn Trail is now the start of a brand new story arc that we haven't even touched yet. Like the base release before patch 7.1, the base release of Dawn Trail hasn't even really touched the overarching story arc. It's just been an introduction to new characters and a new setting. I know a lot of people took to not being the main character in this story so far as a bad thing. I think it's a great thing. It lets us redevelop our characters and move on. I'm really looking forward to what they do. I mean, just to show how much longevity these games have, Final Fantasy XI that was released in 2002, 2003 still has an active player base to this day.
Way ahead of its time.
The fact that there are still people that I know that there are private servers that have developed Final Fantasy XI to what is considered for the majority of its player base as its peak, that have 2,000 to 5,000 players on it daily. Just goes to speak to how well they do their MMOs. So I don't think it's time for them to do another one yet. But when they do, if they do, it's going to be following the trend. It's going to be 10 times better than 14. And I am really looking forward to whatever monstrosity of a story comes out of Yoshi P's head.
So for 14 for me, for a bit of context, I know you know this, Chef, but for me, I played 14 for the first time during lockdown, like many people. And I played A Realm Reborn, Heaven's Ward. I think I got to the start of Shadowbringers. It's basically where I think I got to, because I played so much of it, I burnt out, and I've not been back to it. I plan to at some point, but at a point in my life when I'm extremely, extremely busy with young kids, with loads of different projects. I'm working on, as well as the mods, I'm working on 3 different games at the minute. Like, I've got a lot going on, where if I start playing it, I will just no life it. I will lose all productivity, because I love the game. Like I thought what I've played of it is fantastic. Realm Reborn was a bit of a slog in places, but it's not as bad as people make it out to be. I think it was still very enjoyable.
It was redone. It used to be a slog. They cut out a lot of the fetch quests and the pointless stuff to streamline it for newer players trying to catch up.
It's a good idea. And I think that for me, they could go on and on and on and on for the story. I don't think they should, but they could. I think after a while, if you put the same characters into ridiculous circumstances where it's like this world-ending entity, or this existence-ending entity, and no one dies and everyone's fine by the end of the arc, and it's kind of like, all right, it's a bit jumbled. I think that is a problem with all narrative. That's not just a 14 thing, but I think if you do keep doing that with the same group of characters, or is it Scions? Am I remembering it right?
Yeah, Scions. Yeah, but that is one thing I like about 14. They are not scared to kill off characters.
Then good. If they keep doing them, then great. But even you as a main character would keep going on and getting all powerful, then something comes quicker, and you get into the whole thing of people like damage scaling conversations. And I think, could it keep going on? Yes. If they keep doing good stories, great. But should it go on forever? No.
Just to touch on the follow-up from AJ there, when do you think would be time to start a new one? I think we've got at least another 2 story arcs in the life of the game, but depending on how quickly they go through them, considering World of Warcraft, don't get me wrong, they fucked up and it dipped. But with the 3 expansions they've got coming up that are all, I think they've taken a leaf out of 14's book, and it's all one integrated story that's going to be over 3 expansions, which is new for World of Warcraft to do something like that. Don't get me wrong, all the expansions, they do interlink, otherwise it wouldn't make sense. Mm-hmm. But it's the first 3 expansion story arc they've got going on. I think if World of Warcraft is still going, and that was established, I think maybe 2 years after 11, it speaks to the life of MMOs. I don't know when would be the time to start a new one. It depends on how the industry develops and what else happens. The amount of crossover events that 14 do help. I mean, they've done it with Monster Hunter. They've got one. They've done one with Final Fantasy XI. They've done one with Dragon Quest. They did one with Final Fantasy XV, Final Fantasy XVI.
Surely there would be a problem. There would, in terms of just the game engine itself. So, like, I don't know how they've done it with Warcraft. I certainly don't know how they've done it with 14. But obviously, the technology has changed vastly since the game's initial release. Like, with subsequent patches, like you can patch something, but it doesn't. You can't really change from a different engine halfway through and an expansion. So I think eventually it will get to a point where you'll have to change it anyway, just because the technology we're using is not optimized for the engine that they used at the time. So there will be all sorts of bottlenecking issues and all sorts. Maybe I'm completely wrong there, but that's how I think about it.
So
just from a technology point.
You think at the time, when the time comes that they'd have to change to a new engine, would be when they would be developing a new MMO?
I mean, probably. Like, thinking about it logically, that's probably the reason why I have to develop a new one. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I'm not that into like the into like the programming and the engine side of stuff, but logically that's what I would think.
All right. We've got another one from AJ here. Not that one. That one. Which Final Fantasy game do you think has the best world or setting, and what draws you to it?
So it's difficult for me to pick one that's my favourite, because I love them a lot. Like, I love 7's setting, I love 6's setting, I love 8's, I love 9's, I love 10's. Like, with 9, it's between 9 and 10 for my favourite setting. With 9, I remember playing that world for the first time and just feeling completely engrossed in it. It was like a Studio Ghibli meets Final Fantasy sort of thing. Like, and I don't know, that was the world that pulled me in most first, and then I played 10, and Spira is an incredible world. I think that game, there is a reason why they did not have it open world. There is a reason why they didn't have 10 open world. It's so they could build this rich world that feels vibrant, lived in, and the characters feel everything. That is something that 10 did far better than 12, which is everyone in that world is part of the story. Every single person on Spira is a part of that story, which is defeat sin and survive. So that world, the setting, the people who live in it, is probably the best one in terms of everyone being a part of the story. At least that's what I think. It's like in 9, even though I love that world, I love its design. If you think about it, like, there's certain characters who would be in, I don't know, like someone like the old guy in Daguerrero could just sit there and read books for the entire narrative and not know that anything's happened.
Yeah,
like the adventurer who you take that weird finger to, like. He could know it doesn't happen. 6 actually, Fallen Angel are saying 6 is also the same thing. Everyone feels a part of the world. Like, the world of ruin is something that happens for everyone.
For me, in terms of playing and enjoyability, the nostalgia really hits hard, and it might be because of the new Alliance raids that are about to come out in 14. But Final Fantasy XI, I sunk so many hours, like the hours ticked over years. It's in playtime. Like I knew, like the soundtracks for each area. I could walk into a new zone and I'd know down to the split second when the soundtracks were about to start playing. I love Vanadil. I think it's fantastic. But from in terms of a world building, there isn't much to it outside of the actual story itself. Whereas with like Spirit, don't get me wrong, it does have its own backstory and history, but in terms of places like Spira, that is explained more. It has more depth to it. So in terms of me playing it personally, it would be 11. But I'm going to agree with Mike and say overall, probably due to when it was developed and how they developed it, is probably 10.
Can I ask you a question about that, which relates to one of our earlier points?
Yeah.
Do you think a lot of people have that with 10 because it's the first one with the voice acting, it's the first one on PS2? Is that a similar thing for 10 as it is for Final Fantasy VII on PS1? What we were saying, where there's a heavy nostalgia bias.
I think so, but I also think pretty much the same. If 10 and 12 were reversed, 12 would get as much love as 10 does, and 10 would probably get very similar amounts to 12. I think, again, a lot of it comes in when it was developed, the breakthroughs that were made at the time of development and how different it was. But in terms of quality, 12 has a vastly superior voice acting to 10.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that from a lot of people, to be fair.
But then I'm also biased because Gideon Emery's in 12.
Yeah, I still prefer 10 at this point because there's more of it. Like
but the other thing, people who play 12, there's obviously the pre-existing connection to Evilise from Tactics. I think it might be, again, I'm not 100% because I haven't, this is just off the top of my head, I think it's the first time they reused a setting and brought another world back to life, as it were.
Not if you believe that 7 and 10 are the same world. That's a discussion for another time.
That is. But I think that pretty much wraps up all the questions. Is there anything else you want to touch on before we wrap this up?
No, not at all. And just thank you very much for having me, dude. It's been really fun.
Not a problem. We'll put all of Mike's socials and links into the episode description. Gonna be aiming for a release of the episode on November 1st. So that's going to wrap up today's episode of Mognet. Huge thanks to you, Mike, for sharing your amazing work and your journey with us. We got into a lot more depth and topics than were previously intended, but it's been thoroughly enjoyable. If you've enjoyed this conversation, please feel free to check out more of his work and his modding projects. All be linked in the episode descriptions. Follow Mognet for more episodes where we do go on and we'll explore the magic of Final Fantasy with other creators from the community. Speaking of creators, before we go, our next guest, I'm excited to share a sneak peek of the next episode. It will be a Final Fantasy XIV creator called Lacree. She's a passionate content creator and a very long time MMO player. Previously a World of Warcraft player, as we've said, transitioned over to Final Fantasy XIV, has recently started playing 16, and we're going to touch on a lot of the differences in this episode coming up between jumping from Warcraft to 14, how she's found the game, and again, it's ended up as a gateway into the Final Fantasy series for her through Final Fantasy XIV. So thanks for listening. As always, keep adventuring in the world of Final Fantasy, and we will see you next time.